Recording.
All right, Mike, you can go ahead and start the meeting.
At 9 o'clock, let's call this meeting to order, please. Roll call, please.
Mike Berlin,
Here.
Laura Negro,
Here.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Ron,
Here.
Marty Vitek.
Here.
And that would be everyone.
Yeah, we have a full quorum. Let's take a look at the agenda for approval. Any additions or deletions? Do we have a motion to accept?
Ron will make a motion, we accept.
Hi, Ron. We're on motions to accept. Do we have a second?
This is Laura. I'll second that.
Hi, Laura. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carried. Do we have any 3 minutes? I see we have some extra people online here, so Lori, has anyone required a 3-minute session?
No, they have not.
I'll ask for a 3-minute comment one more time. We'll proceed to item number 4, approval of the minutes.
Marty Vitek, I move we approve the minutes.
Marty makes a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Ron will second.
Ron seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carried. Item next is the Ashton area fourth quarter request. You want to critique that a little bit there, Clark?
Yep, we're just basically, this is the fourth quarter. It's a perfunctory task. AADC makes a request every quarter for the money that we allocate for economic development for the county. With that, we'd be seeking a motion to approve the AADC fourth quarter request.
This is Laura. Is so moved.
This is Pat. I'll second.
We have a motion by Laura, second by Pat. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. I thought I saw Betsy Harris or someone had logged on earlier, but I don't see them any longer. Okay, with that, going
I'm
on
still
to
here. Mike,
Pardon?
I'm still here. This is Betsy. I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Did you have anything to say, bring up, or discuss?
I'm more than happy to answer any questions that the board might have, the committee might have. I think the situation in the city and the county, in the southern part of the county, is pretty obvious to everybody by this point. There definitely are some business sectors that are really, really hurting right now, but there's also some business sectors that this has been kind of a boon to their revenue. So for instance, greenhouses, landscapers, construction, outdoor recreation, all of them are having a hard time keeping up with the demand.
Betsy, this is Pat. A question I get asked occasionally is the status of the Science Center. And I know you and others have been busy with lots of other things. Could you give me any idea of when that might get back on the radar of you and others?
You know, it's never really going to be off of my radar, but I have to follow the priorities of our partners that'll be working on this. So the higher ed institutions, of course, are very, very focused on COVID and students and online versus offline and testing. They have got not even one iota of time to talk about this. The city has made it really clear that they're not spending any time on this right now. They're pretty much focused on the present. So this hasn't halted. This is just put on pause. I totally intend, when the timing is right and our partners can participate, to bring it to the forecenter again.
Okay, and that's what I've been telling people that I believe has been going on. So it was nice to hear it directly from you. So thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Okay. Any other questions for the Betsy Harris? As you know, we've already passed your fourth quarter, so we're good to go. All right, with that, let's go to the revolving loan update.
Okay, this is just, there's no motion needed for this. We're basically just showing you in your packet the current balances of the bank balance in the revolving loan. As you're well aware, the county did decide to apply for the granting of the bank balance as these loans are being closed out to the highway department for County Road. And if I believe correctly, we did get a payment from Culvers. And so they paid off their loan of they paid off the $83,000. So you can see the bank balance there is at $508,000. We had originally planned around maybe 425, 450, but it will definitely be used on the road. So we don't have any problem with the project not being large enough to accommodate the grant that we're giving ourselves for that road. So just an update item, no action.
Information only.
Yep.
Any questions from the board? If there's no question, let's go to the sales tax report then. Thank you.
Sales tax report is in your packet, and we don't quite have the numbers for September. The state basically accumulates things from the 20th to the 20th, and they should get them posted today. I was hoping they get posted by this morning, but they're not there yet. So we're basically no change from the last time we presented this at the county board. We are ahead of schedule. When we look at this, we have $958,000 in sales tax compared to the previous years here, 847, 878, 938. We're at that. So I think we're going to make it probably somewhere close to this $1.4 million. We're in the budgetary process. The reason I bring this up is in the budgetary process, we have to pick a number to put in for sales tax collections for 21. The state kind of gives us a maximum number, but the standard practice for most organizations is not to go to the max number, because then if you miss it, then you got to take funds out of a bank to balance the budget. So I'm thinking, and I can't remember what number I put in there, but I think I put in like maybe $100,000 less than this, maybe 1.39. I'll have to look at the budget, and we'll be discussing that as part of the budget process. So again, just information. And any questions about sales tax?
No.
I guess we're good. This is
Yep.
information only as well, right, Clark?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, let's, we're plowing through this agenda here pretty quickly here. Let's go on
Sure,
to number
slow
8. Pardon?
I said, I'm sure it'll slow down soon.
Well,
Yeah, you're
we're
gonna hit the
we're
wall.
gonna
You're
hit
gonna hit
a
the wall
pothole
pretty
here
shortly here.
soon. Okay. Who's got this, Clark or Sue?
Yeah, so this is item number 8 on the agenda, monthly financial reports. Again, this is just an information. No motion is needed. It's for the committee's review. And if there's any questions for staff, we can research and get back to you after the meeting.
Any questions from the board? Anybody have a chance to look at this? I was looking at it earlier this morning. I have no questions.
Okay. All right.
Forestry and county land.
Okay, so as you've been aware, we've been struggling with trying to balance the budget with a couple $100,000 decrease in forest revenue. For next year projected, we're probably also $250,000 decrease for this year. I had asked, one of the things for the finance committee to consider is when we look at the long-term structural deficits that the county has laid before because of the levy limit laws, do we want to try to increase the independence of the county by adding forest lumber or forest lands to the county management system in order to decrease the reliance on the state and the fluctuations from the state? There's a letter in here that basically Chris Hoffman drafted up for us. And I believe, Chris, you're on the line. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so basically the gist of this, and Chris will weigh in here in a second, the gist of this letter is, does the finance committee think it's prudent to investigate what it would take to add county forest lands in order to increase forest revenues for the county? And basically, Chris, if you could kind of explain what that process would look like.
Sure. Right now, we have the land that we have. There are inholdings of both private and commercial properties within the county forest boundaries today, some of which are for sale. There are programs within the state that we can leverage state grant funding to help defray some of the costs up to 50% of the purchase price for the county. The rub is we have to have some capital up front to be able to come up with that other 50% for the purchase of that property. And if we can add some more property to our land base, we can hopefully smooth out some of the hills and valleys in the revenue stream, and we can increase our annual target from, we always work in that $700,000 to $750,000 range, hopefully closer to $900,000 to $1 million range. But it would take, it's going to take time and investment on the county's part in order to make that happen. And it was just an idea Clark and I had when we were looking at our revenue issues that we've got this year. This is a potential avenue to go down to try to shore up that revenue stream.
And so staff basically is asking if the finance committee is interested enough for to direct staff to do some research and do further number generation. What would it cost to purchase land? What would be the payback periods on it, and come back to the finance committee if they're interested in expanding the county forest lands? We obviously would do research on it.
This is Pat. I fully support doing that research and then looking at not just what the financial numbers are related to this, but because it sounds like it's infill, what the implications are related to the recreational value of that land, as far as trails going, cross-country skiing, hunting, etc., how that would also have other benefits to the county. So, I think wood products are only going to increase in value long-term, all things considered in this country.
So the map you're looking at right here, Chris, it's this light green color.
Correct. Excuse me. It's everything basically south of Mellon, along the Iron County line, going down towards Butternut, that light green color.
And the brown is what?
The brown is commercially held properties within the county forest, and then the white would be privately held properties.
Okay. All right. So the question is, then, if the finance committee wants to direct staff to do this, we would basically come back and say, here's a multi-year purchase plan. Now, I know the Forest Service you have a 15-year plan you're currently working on. Is that correct, Chris?
That's correct. We're in the process of revising and rewriting our 15-year comprehensive land management plan.
So we currently have a plan that we're working off from.
Correct. We have an existing plan that was written in 2005. And we're just tweaking that and modifying that to the way we operate today.
So that's already a 15-year-old plan. So do we need a motion on that or just a consensus to have our staff research?
A motion would probably be best because then it will be in the minutes that basically the finance committee wants staff to do some research and come back with a recommendation that would involve basically capital, basically increasing debt levy to purchase county lands at some point.
I believe with Pat Kenny's comment, I believe he would make that motion.
I'll make a motion to direct staff to research considering the purchase of additional forest lands, and that research also include the costs related to taking this off the tax roll.
I'm looking for a second to that motion.
This is Marty Vitek. I'll second it.
We got a second by Marty Vitek. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carried.
I do have a question. I've been trying to think of some creative ways for us to do this too, with some creative financing, and I don't know, Pat's usually very good at this stuff, but I also have a contact at the DOA that I've been talking with, and there might be a possibility for us to find outside investors also and do it. And I know I punted this to Clark, but there are some creative ways. So can we also try to think outside of the box? I mean, for a long, and I'm sure there's been a lot of people that have gone through this because we're, especially up north, we're all in the same kind of pickle, but trying to find creative ways to increase revenue for our people that doesn't balance our budget on their backs, especially on the poor people in our county, is something that is very important to me. And so I'm going to keep looking, and I appreciate all the work that the staff does on this.
Yep, Laura, I would encourage you to give Chris Hoffman a call because he can walk you through the Knowles Nelson grant process. They will help out with about half the cost of the land as a grant, provided we share timber revenue that's generated for like a 5-year period that comes off the land. And that's about the extent of my knowledge. So Chris knows more about it, but he could certainly, we'll put that in the report also, what the standard purchasing operations have been.
I appreciate that.
Yes. Ron he was queuing in. Did you have something, Ron?
No, I was just approving, but I guess you guys didn't hear me.
Okay. If I see your light come on, I'm going to give you a chance to speak, whether we're late or not. So, all right, good. With that, then general discussion, general budget discussion, I believe.
Yeah, so this is where your meeting is going to slow down, Chairperson. Sorry, I apologize for that. So I'm just going to go through some of the things. So at the last finance meeting, the finance committee had directed staff to research, are there other avenues for revenue generation for county governments? And so in your packet that you read today, you'll see the gas tax, which is levied by the state. There's state law precludes counties from issuing their own gas tax. Now, lots of these issues that we're going to be discussing today could be changed by legislative action. And so you'd have to get a bill passed, you'd have to get it through the Congress and the Senate, and then have the governor sign it. And so the legislative functionality of the people in Madison isn't at the high point, I would say. So I don't put a lot of hope in it, but I do have an interesting proposal after I get done with this presentation. Franchise fees. Franchise fees are basically fees that are tacked onto electrical, natural gas use, phone use, that in the state statutes that rest in municipalities to be able to levy if they so choose. Therefore, it's not available for county governments. There's a room tax. Room tax can be basically spent on hotels. Municipalities and county governments can do this. Oh, wait, sorry. It's only available to towns and cities. Sorry, not counties. So I guess that, even though I did the research, that's not available to a county government. Premier Resort Area Tax. And there's links in there for you to learn more about it. It's a local retail tax. So it's another sales version of a sales tax, which is administered by the Department of Revenue. A sponsoring municipality or a political subdivision that has at least 40% of its equalized assessed values used by the tourist-related retailers. And there's statutes in there for the definitions. May enact an ordinance that puts this tax into effect. If we don't meet the 40%, and we have not, staff has not done the math on that, my anticipation is that 40% of our equalized value is not tourist related. The legislators would have to pass a bill that would allow us to impose this tax. It could be used to pay for infrastructures as defined in 66113. Infrastructure expenses means the cost of purchasing, constructing, improving parking lots, access way, transportation facilities, including roads and bridges, sewer and water facilities, exposition center facilities used primarily for conventions, trade shows, music, dramatic events, or other events involving educational, cultural, recreation, sporting, or commercial activities, parks, boat ramps, beaches, other recreational facilities, firefighting equipment, police vehicles, ambulances, and other equipment or materials dedicated to public safety or public works. So this is in the state law, and we can do further write-ups if the committee is interested in this, but the city of Bayfield does have this premier resort area sales tax. And that basically was a bill that was sponsored through the legislatures along with, I think, maybe 5 or 6 others. So this would be something that we would, again, have to go through the state legislators to get passed. And then it would basically be, it could support like purchase of like police vehicles. You can see here, we could, you could look at the roads and bridges basically as you're looking at supporting the roads for tourists to come here. So it would help on that aspect. Obviously you couldn't apply it towards, courts or law enforcement, Health and Human Services, courthouse, and other issues like that. But it would be another avenue to look at, and this would be more of a long-term solution, because I'm sure it would take a year or two for that to get through the legislators, given their current cooperation with each other. Sales tax cannot be raised by state law. Levy referendum. Levy referendum can be done at a regular election. It is best to consider this during an April election, as that is when you would build out your budget. You would know if it passed or not. This would be something to consider for April of 21 for the 2022 budget and going forward. The county tried this in August of 18 and it did not pass. This could be to limited public outreach or other issues relating to misunderstanding and uses of the funds. So again, that would be, that's not a 2022 budget issue. That would be something for 2020. That's not a 21 budget issue. That's a 22, maybe 23 budget issue if the county is looking at trying to support, the budget without basically cutting back on staff and services. The wheel tax. The wheel tax is utilized to pay for roads only. We're going to see more and more counties impose this tax as there's no other path to relief from the levy limit law. Ashen County has 13,400 vehicles which qualify for the tax. So at $25 a car, we would gather $335,000 for the highway department. General levy funds being sent to the highway department could be utilized to stabilize the general government without using bank funds to balance the budget or to get money directly from the staff, either in pay decreases or furloughs or layoffs or firing. If we pass the wheel tax, we could restore all the community contributions we normally give and not take one-time money out of the bank to balance the budget. If we continue to take money out of the bank balance, we'll end up not making payroll at some point. And these are counties which have done this, and there's probably a list 2 or 3 times as long that of municipalities that do this. So before I go further into budget discussions, is there any, I guess even though the committee had recommended that we not study the wheel tax any further, but looking at these rest of these, in short, the summary for the budget solution for next year is basically taking $250,000 out of the bank, cutting all the community contributions that we're giving to outside agencies, cutting travel, cutting in-services, cutting office supplies, not doing any, other expenses. So it's a super, super temporary solution, and it will not work in 2022. And so, the sales tax is something, the wheel tax is something which needs 90 days notice. If the county board were to adopt it on October 6th, it would basically impose itself on the citizens starting in January at some point. If we wait till later, obviously we'd collect less money and we'd have to use more money out of the bank. So are there any questions concerning just generally about the individual options for revenue generation for the county?
This is Pat. Let me backtrack a little bit. The goal is to have a 0% increase in the tax rate, correct?
We do not have because we have a decrease in revenues of a few $100,000, we will be decreasing, well, actually, if I go to the budget worksheet, the bottom line here is you end up with a slight decrease in your levy from 543 to 529, but you have an increase in your debt levy from 101 to 140. You have an overall proposed levy increase of between general levy and debt levy of 644 to 670. And that is basically taking $250,000 out of the bank and doing all the further cuts that we had. So if we wanted to have a 0% increase, we definitely would have to have obviously we have to have new revenue of at least $300,000 or $400,000.
So where are you, just in case you're thinking something different now, we had at the last finance meeting, I believe it was the last one, if not the one before, our goal was to have a 0% change in the on property taxes for homeowners and businesses, correct?
I was not able to accomplish that.
Okay, so the 0.9% that we, or approximately that we could increase taxes due to net new construction, explain where we're at with considering using some or all of that 0.9% capacity.
Yeah, that gets built into this overall. So we get this number here, the 6.679 million comes from the levy worksheet. Let me see, pages from shared revenue.
So your plan is to utilize that capacity at this point?
Yeah, that's a full $23,000 increase.
Okay, so just that, so we're on the same page. So the intent now is to utilize the capacity to increase using that 0.9%. And then these additional numbers, the money from the bank, et cetera, is all in addition to that then, correct?
Yeah, so we get $23,000 more of levy. That's the levy limit law. And the reason that the proposed general levy decreases from 543 to 529 is that your equalized value
Has gone up.
is going up. And the difference here is the way the general levy limit law is written, it's only net new construction. So if you have a city or a village that increases, they say they do a new assessment and they basically reassess their properties. The levy doesn't really change. Like I said, we can only increase the levy $23,000. So what happens is your spread, even so your overall valuation increases, and you spread the general levy limit over a higher valuation, but that does not give you more money to run the government. And, you know, off the top, we basically have a decrease of revenue of a few $100,000, 200,000 from the forestry department. We have a $115,000 decrease that we use from shared revenue for health and human services. And then there's a couple $100,000 decrease from outside revenue from roads. And so, yeah, you know, I was not able to accomplish the budget, and it would take some really drastic measures. So not only do we take out $250,000 here to balance the budget, and that's basically a 0% increase for staff and cutting every department and cutting all of our outside contributions. We also are using, I'm going to, let's see, view.
I just wanted to have, I guess, a short conversation that we are utilizing that capacity, even though a meeting or two ago we were hoping not to utilize it. And that the numbers you gave us today and spoke to are in addition to utilizing that capacity.
Yes, we're going to be increasing that $23,000 for the levy.
Okay. So
And basically taking $250,000 out of the bank and another $184,000 out of another fund to basically, so we're basically balancing the budget on you know, reserves basically at this point.
So on the wheel tax and the levy, I wasn't on the county board when the referendum was put out, but from what I read in the paper and conversations I heard, my take was that that was largely billed or marketed or explained as something that was being requested due to law enforcement issues. And in particular, there was discussion about a new you know, law enforcement center, et cetera. So my take would be, and this may not be how everyone perceived it, but it was really tied to a new building related to law enforcement. And I think for the people I talked to, that was a big reason why it was not supported. My preference before we do a wheel tax would be to consider a referendum again and ask for a modest increase for a number of years, say 3 to 5 years. I'm going to throw out a number here, and I don't know if this one makes sense, but say a 3% annual increase for 5 years, and say, you know, we need this to cover operations and other things, maintain roads. And that way the public can say, yeah, I can live with 3% for this many years, and everyone is going to pay in direct proportion to their assessed value. But then also an explanation of the request for a referendum to explain that if the referendum doesn't pass, that the next option that the county may consider is the wheel tax, and then explain how that would work and how it would not capture any revenue from, you know, a number of businesses, say Walmart and others, who, you know, don't have vehicles where they would pay that tax in that are at least not in direct proportion to the assessed value of their property. So that would be my preference on direction.
So going back to the, okay, going back to, let's see here, budget discussions. Okay, so basically, we're going to go through the budget here, and I'll take questions when we get to the budget, but the 2022 budget is a patchwork, is unsustainable. It basically, right. I mean, even a 3% property tax increase probably would not sustain the government where it is. I think you'd have to really seriously look at, what level of government are you going to provide, and are you going to provide services 5 days a week? We have some things that basically are, you know, we're mandated to provide the services. We don't have a choice. And so you end up with mandating everything and then having nothing else left. One of the issues that I have basically, because there really isn't any long-term solution for this. I think you're going to eventually bankrupt the county if you don't increase revenue. And so, and this is just me being honest with you, there's not enough money to balance the budget going forward without additional revenue and substantial additional revenue. one of the things that I am proposing, and I basically am working with the WCA, and I'll be looking for a sponsor, is I'm proposing a bill that would be creating a new levy, which would be called the Law and Order Levy. And the reason I'm looking at doing this is because the courts basically are mandated by the state, obviously, to provide, and we have very limited avenues to control court costs. They get to decide pretty much what they, psychiatric, outside advisory councils, guardian ad litems, all these different things. And when you look at the budget, the people, actually, I'm going to look at this other budget here. So back when the levy law was instituted, the libraries saw they didn't want to be tied into the counties because they realized in the long term, the counties are going to hit a wall. They're not going to be able to fund services. They're just going to continually to cut back services. The libraries are their own levy. And what I'm proposing is adding another block right down here, and this would take legislative action, that would basically pull out the court systems. That would be an additional levy for the courts to run basically the district attorneys and the court systems, because that would provide room for the county government to keep operating without basically shutting down services. And so that I'm working on that independently. I did talk to WCA. I've talked to the attorneys down there. If they do get a bill drafted at that point, or they get something in writing, they get something drafted up, we'd be obviously coming back to the county for would they support such a move. But whether Ashland supports it or not, the WCA likes the idea, and they would probably try to push forward with it. And they would give the opportunity for Ashland to weigh in on it at that point when we get something in writing besides just what's inside my head,
So let me ask you this in broad strokes. Would this be something that the board could consider? A wheel tax for a short number of years, and that would provide gap funding until a referendum was considered, and then explain the pros and cons of each. If a levy referendum is passed, it distributes the need for increased revenue proportionately to all taxpayers, whereas if that levy referendum fails, then the option of a wheel tax, if that's approved, then that does not require a fair number of larger taxpayers, with real estate such as a Walmart, et cetera. They would not be making an additional contribution. So that would give us a gap of several years, the wheel tax, and then we see what happens with the levy referendum. And ultimately, then the public will have told us through that referendum if they support an increased tax rate through a referendum, and what rate for what number of years, versus if they'd rather have the wheel tax.
I think that would be a fair solution, because then you're not going to be bankrupting the county. I would hate to get to the point of not making payroll.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think it frankly, from an employer organizational standpoint, if, we basically obviously we're giving no increases this year. If we basically say to the county employees, there won't be an increase for you for wages for the next 5 years, I think you're going to have a tough time recruiting people and retaining staff.
Yeah.
I think that's just not a very good message. And if we start taking money from the employees, that was obviously one of my first suggestions was, and some counties are doing this, are furloughing their staff in order to balance the budget. And again, I think that would really be, that would really hurt the county, employee morale. And I just don't, there's no fair way to institute it in my mind. Once I investigated furloughing, because you can't furlough, obviously, the sheriff's department running a 24-hour jail and law enforcement. You can't furlough anybody on the third floor of the courthouse. The court systems of the district attorneys, all those county employees they come under a separate statute. We don't have the county board doesn't have the authority to basically close down court operations. That's up to the court and the Supreme Court to decide that. We have some mandated services that have to be provided within a 24-hour period. You end up going from 200 employees down to this small little group of like 70 people, you'd have to take hundreds of thousands of dollars away from. Obviously, unsustainable issue. And so that is off the table.
Yeah, so-
I
Yeah.
can't see doing that.
So I understand I understand why we need the revenue. The wheel tax as a temporary stopgap would provide an opportunity for a referendum, and it would give you time to research what amount or what percent increase on a referendum would be needed to sustain operations for a number of years going forward, 5 years, whatever. And then the public can decide, do I want the referendum or do I want the wheel tax? But if you want services, ultimately you're saying yes or no to services through that process too. When I was on the city council, the wheel tax was floated several times and it got shot down rather strongly both times. And I did get more feedback on this wheel tax prior to meetings than most issues. And the reason is that it's extremely regressive tax in a community or a county that has a high poverty rate. But if the public doesn't support the referendum next time, when it's explained why it's needed and where it goes, then the board will not have much for options regarding whether there's a wheel tax or not.
In an email that I sent the committee members for discussion purposes,
Yep,
we
I
did
read that.
We did survey a number of counties, or some counties that basically would renew their wheel tax on a yearly basis, more or less in the summer, basically in order to, that way you knew if you had it for your budget. And so, yeah, so if we were to put in a 3-year wheel tax, we could look for a referendum for April of next year, do the research on that, do the salesmanship, and say, do you want, we need the revenue, and we're going to have to collect it either from the property tax owners or from the people that own cars. We could also look at that premier resort, the premier resort tax. Again, this would be a legislative issue. That could be researched in that 3-year period. And if we could get that into effect, that would help some of the levy. Obviously, it wouldn't help with, health and human services and jails and those kind of things. But you could also look at, the concept that came up with the law and order levy from state law. I'm sure that would take a couple years probably to get through the process. But I think when I think about the law and order levy down in Madison, I can see 2 separate camps, a blue camp and a red camp, and I can see points where each camp can get a win out of it. It may be something that could get through the legislators this year and could fix this statewide issue. And
on the premier resort tax, David Eads, the Bayfield Chamber Director, was on council starting in 2010 with me. You may want to talk to him about that. He could give you some background and thoughts on whether it may pass or not. The city of Ashland did consider it a couple of times. The city did not meet the 40%, not even close. But whether you try to get it passed or not, David could give you some thoughts on that as far as the likelihood. It did not sound like it would be easy to do in the legislature.
I don't think it'd be easy to do either, because again, you'd have to have the blue team and the red team agreeing down in Madison to say this is a good thing for the county, because the county is obviously not going to meet the 40%. And so again, that's a legislative issue. That's a couple-year process. And the county board would have to, initiate the process, to say we want to do this. We'd have to basically draft a bill and get a bill introduced, have sponsors, Bewley and Myers would have to sponsor a bill for us. So yeah, that's a multi-year issue.
It is, but on that list of the 8 different places that have it, only Lake Delton and Wisconsin Dells and Bayfield was close. But the rest of them do not have the 40%, and they did get that 0.5% put in. As we're talking about this, I'd also like to throw out there, do we have any services that are tax-backed that could be changed to a user fee backed process? So that way we would have say in the fees, and we could work with the fees to fill some of these gaps. I mean, I think we need to, I'm not happy with the wheel tax. I've already made that pretty clear. And I get that, we have these gaps to fill, and that we are kind of behind the 8 ball because some of this stuff hasn't been looked at and taken care of. But we need to be the most creative that we can, because adding a wheel tax to somebody who possibly can't pay their rent right now because of COVID and because of how their job has been, I'm having a hard time doing that. Taxing on the back of I'm almost ready to be able to put it in for support it for a year at a time, but not 3 years. This would have to, for me, this would have to be revisited every year, because I don't want to put anything on someone that they can't handle. And we're hitting people while they're low right now, and on something that they can't control. And I understand we can't either, but we need to start looking at what places we have things contracted out. Could we do it for ourselves cheaper? We need to look at everything. I think everything needs to be on the table. I don't want to, and the staff, I mean, that's, you know, I know as we're elected that the people we represent in the county are our first, you know, kind of things, but that staff is really important to me too. So I don't want to see that anything like that, and I don't see it working, because as you said, you know, once you get down to that certain pool of people.
I would like to see it just on an annual basis too, and that way it forces the board to each year look for other options. Because if you go anything more than a year, then it gets really easy to put off dealing with addressing issues and looking for something that's not as regressive to fill the budget.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So continue. Actually, any other words on this, on the wheel tax? I mean, I'll just go through a couple things before we come back to the wheel tax. So increasing employee contributions to healthcare, thus giving employees a pay cut. We could get, you know, $100,000 or $200,000 out of the employees by decreasing their take-home pay. We could decrease health benefits and increase out-of-pocket deductibles. I'm not in favor of that, because you're basically, the people who reach these high deductibles are the sickest of the employee group. I think they're probably the least likely to be able to afford a high deductible. And so I'm not very supportive of that. One of the things I'm looking at is eliminating the option for retired employees to continue pay for county health care after they turn 65. Right now, basically, and I don't even know where this comes from, but we have 6 people who are over the age of 65, and they pay a subsidized low health care rate. The full load health care is like $2,000 a month, and they're paying like $400 to $600. And I'm going to recommend that we basically pull them out of the system, because they're on Medicare. They can just buy a supplemental plan. And so I don't know why we ended up doing this, but I would recommend we pull those people out. It's not going to really affect the general, you know, it might affect the general levy in 2022, because you have to gain experience of your healthcare experience in order for them to lower the rates. But I am not in favor of continuing it as is, giving them a subsidized option. Asking for voluntary reduction of work week hours. We could see if that could generate, you know, a few $1,000s. Ask for voluntary furloughs with approved from supervisors. We could see if that would garner a few $1,000s. We could look at incentive pays for county employees to refuse county insurance. We did some investigation in that, and I guess if we end up sharing employees between us and the city, it ended up, I guess they tried this once before, they talked about it. It ended up being a bidding war, where the county would give you $300 a month to refuse service, and then the city would say, we'll give you $350, and the county would say, we'll give you $400. I don't know. I don't have any experience with incentive programs to refuse county insurance. From an actuarial standpoint, I think, you know, you may end up taking some of the people that have less utilization in healthcare and going with another lesser insurance. Maybe the partner has a lesser insurance, and so you're basically take somebody who we are contributing for, that's not utilizing and keeping the people that utilize it more. I don't know if that would help us in 2022 or not. So, like I said, I don't have much experience with it. We have a number of organizations around the county that we have traditionally given general levy dollars to. One option is to cut some or all of those contributions to help offset the shortfall. In the proposed budget, you'll find a list of outside agencies and proposed cuts. If these are restored, we'd either pass a wheel tax or take more money out of the bank. And let's see, I have this list right here. And county board obviously will be weighing in on these issues on the 6th. And so here's Ashland Office on Aging. We decreased them 5%. County BART, we decreased them 50%. UW 5%. County Fair 50%. Tri-County Corridor 50%. Nothing to the Visitor Center. We moved, in my budget, I'm moving the Northwest Library organization that does the distribution. That was general levy dollars, so I'm just moving that to the library levy. So that comes off the general levy. There's a savings of $23,000 to the general levy. Northwest Regional Planning, 50%. Economic Development, 50%. Tourism Bureau from WCA, 50%. Hazardous Waste, 50%. Housing Authority, 50%. Airport, I'm basically moving $46,000, that is capital, and their $87,000 request to the debt levy, increasing the debt levy, obviously. And then the operations portion of it, of 41,000, I'm decreasing by an amount, basically. I decreased, I picked up, no pay increase for the employee and some other things. Since we're co-owners of it, I'm just weighing in the same and cutting it like I would any other department that we run. And so basically that saves us some substantial money, basically 582 to 440. Now some of that goes into debt levy. So 46 goes to debt levy and 23 goes to debt levy. So it's not 100% savings there, but these would be issues that the county will be before the county board on the 6th also.
Clark, is cutting Northwest Regional Planning an option with being a member with them?
I don't know. I mean,
I'm not sure that that's an option we have.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an option or not. I guess the question then is, do we just eliminate it totally? So some of these things is if we have a contractual obligation, then the question is, do we eliminate and just not be part of the organization? Type thing.
And I would suggest on Northwest Regional Planning, you do some research on if we have an option to cut, and do we even really have an option to not be involved, because there might be implications for getting grants from the state, et cetera. So I'd encourage you to talk to them, and then also to Betsy Harris at the ADC, obviously. And on the economic development, having worked with Betsy and the staff there on the Science Center project for a number of years, I've gained some appreciation for the work they do and how hard they work. I would encourage you to talk to her and see what the implications of that cut would be, because I think there'd be some real downside to our business community. And one of the things Betsy has done is brought in an incredible amount of grant money to the county. And if those services are cut, the cut that's proposed here may well result in a lot fewer dollars coming to the county that Betsy has been bringing in. So I'd encourage you to have a conversation with her too on that.
Yeah, and so these I have a balanced budget basically before you, and anything we want to add back in here, we're just gonna at the current rate, we just have to take more money out of our bank and just write a check to them because we don't have any more revenue, and I don't want to go. I mean, I definitely don't want to go to the employees and cut their healthcare costs in order to pay Northwest Regional Planning. That doesn't make any sense to me either. So it's more of a balancing act, which is, how much money do you want to take out of the bank, or are we going to pass the wheel tax, which would basically, I don't know if we get 100% from taking out of the bank, but it certainly wouldn't be 250 because, but it probably would restore a lot of those cuts there, and it probably would take you know, the majority of this 250, that would be about the extent of it. I don't think I could get any pay increase for the staff. That's still, that we'd still have to look at 2022 to see how do we change the budget in order to either decrease expenses in order to give the staff a pay increase in 2022. And I've told the staff that my goal is to basically have no increases for 21, but I will work, whether it's revenue or laying people off, to get pay increases for 22, because I can't keep staff if I'm going to say, you're never going to get a raise again.
On the county transit, that's the BART system, if I understood you.
That's correct.
Okay, so you know that Dick has been chair of BART for a number of years, or has served as BART chair.
I am
So
aware.
they've got a system set up where they've got a number of partners and they have agreements on contributions. So I would encourage you to talk to Dick Pufall on the county transit, hence the BART, and understand what the implications of that would be for the agreements they have with other entities on providing funding. So you understand what that proposed cut would mean in terms of that whole bigger picture. And if
These aren't easy choices, but the choices are either raise more revenue or take more money out of a bank. Those are your choices.
Yeah, and I think the city council also considered cutting funding to BART a number of times. And when you start looking at their funding stream and agreements, we ended up supporting BART because the ripple effect of not doing it was pretty undesirable. So, you know, some of these, I think as a board, we're going to end up saying, yep, we're going to have to find the revenue, even if that means a wheel tax for 1 year. Because some of those, I just don't see the board supporting cuts because of who they serve.
And Pat, I would,
Yeah,
I totally agree with you, because every one of those projects, every one of those organizations has people that are, you know, they're fans of it. And so, but I think I can't honestly go and cut every department. I've cut every department.
right.
And I can't say, we're not going to cut we're not going to cut contributions, because I mean, it's just not fair. That's not equitable.
No. So the city council had cut contributions, found some things to cut. And then I think it's always good to go through this stuff and understand why you contribute. So Northwest Regional Planning, the ADC and the BART, you know, when you go through that, then you say, okay, here's the reason to support it. And then it also then helps to get to a point where you make other choices either on cuts or finding sources of funding. So I think the examination is always a positive thing wherever we end up.
Yeah. Before I go through the budget worksheet, I just want to let you know where we're at on a timeline here. So we basically are here at this finance meeting. The budget, if you have any recommendations, I will be sending this proposed budget to the county board for the 6th, because again, these are some hard choices that are having to be made. These are issues that we have to balance this budget. The county board will weigh in on these issues, and if they have any changes, I would like to convene this committee back on the 15th of October, a hard date, because in order to make we have to line up the loan from the bank. We have to send out the public notice on the 19th, a hard date. We have to publish the notice on the 21st, a hard date. And then of course your budget approval is on the 10th of November, which is a hard date. And then after that, we basically close on the debt levy, receive our money for our debt levy loan. And then we certify the levy after we receive our money from the bank. And then going forward from this in like February, we pay off the bank loan. So we're basically looking at, let's see, where are we at for budget here? So like on our capital levy, we're looking at a $1.7 million loan for, 70 days or something like that. And that includes, and I basically have $1.9 million in debt levy, and I'm taking out $184,000 from transfers, which I'll go over with you where they came from. And so that's where we're at. Any questions on the timeline, by the way?
No questions, but it would be nice to have an extra session in there because for next time, because as we go through this, these decisions aren't going to get easier. They're going to get more difficult. Also, I'd like us to look at some type of possibly combining some services with the city. That's a option, and I know it's long-term planning, but if we don't start long-term planning now, we'll never start long-term planning. So I think that needs to be on the table to see if we can reduce some of that tax levy for both the county and the city. And then I'm not happy about that airport project. If each one of the departments can go through and see if there's a possibility for adjustment of fees to help with some of this, because that's the place where we have more play than anything else, is the place where we have user fees. And I know it's the people that utilize that end up needing to pay the increase on some of that, but isn't that how it's supposed to be? The people that use a service or things that are paying in a little bit more on some of these things. But
And at what point in time in 21, 22 or 22, 23 are we looking at hopefully making available a COLA for our county employees? Because they have not gotten a COLA here for some time.
The county employees got 2% in 2020 this year.
Okay.
So they did get a raise this year, and the union staff, which is just a small group of people that are sheriffs, but not jailers, they have a separate agreement. And obviously that's the only union we have to deal with. So I'm gonna go through the budget here for a little bit. And the Finance Committee has seen this. This is in a draft form, so I did not post this yet because we're still working on it. So we basically have expenditures and revenues. Some of these numbers, obviously, you know, like federal aid, shared revenues, those are given to you by the state. You know, we have, you know, these miscellaneous revenues, some of these court costs, those are mandated by the state. You don't get to change those fees. Some things, interest, we have, we're not getting as much interest on our investments as we used to get. Land information fees, you know, these are the staff's estimates. We've gone through and I bumped up revenues where I think we can stretch and try to get there, because obviously I want to take less money out of the bank if I can, or tax less if I can. So I've been trying to see if they can get there, but as things change, and we basically try to be, we're trying to be as honest and open as we can. We're not trying to fudge and put in unrealistic numbers for revenues and fees that we're collecting. We bumped the, bail forfeitures up, the DA fees, the guardian ad litem fees, we're getting a little bit less for that. License plate renewals are a set fee. Circuit court childcare fees, we are going up with that. We didn't have any large assembly permit. I don't know if we're going to have that. So we didn't make it this year. Well, obviously, I don't think we're going to do it next year either. Revolving loan administration fees, we're not going to get anything for that. And so when we look at the general government expenditures here, we basically cut, which is what I expect every other organization we give. We're cutting the budgets. So we're cutting the budgets, this much money. And so I'd expect everybody else to do the same. And then revenue, we basically are pretty close, 99% on there. Public property protection. Again, we have some fees. So we have, we're being realistic on the probation and parole. We have, we're being more realistic on charging inmate daily fees. What are we really collecting, even though we're charging them? Domestic violence grants, recreational officer fees is DNR. Bad River Patrol is basically a cost. So even though it went from 370 to 340, the cost is 340. It's a direct cost, 100% allocation. Whatever we charge for that, they pay.
Clark, I sent you an email a couple of days ago, and I don't know if you saw it or had time to get to it yet, but like on the law enforcement grants where you got $0 for 2020 and 0 for 2021, and then 0% to the right of that.
Yeah.
Mathematically, that 0% doesn't make sense because you would be dividing by 0 and it's undefined, meaning it's not a real number. So that 0%, you could either just, leave that cell blank or put an NA because ones like that, it's not a 0%. If you did have money in the budget for 2020 and then you took it out for 2021, that would be a 0%. There's a couple places through this where that sort of thing happened.
There's also, you had.
Yeah, so that looks good on law enforcement
We
training.
also had the opposite where we had money in 2022 and nothing, so we have to put in something to get a formula to work because something divided by 0 is still 0.
Right, and just that cell shouldn't say 0%, so it's undefined.
Yeah.
And so when I look through these spreadsheets and I see those 0%, I look back and that's, given what I did, I look at that and it's like, well, wait a minute.
Okay.
It turns out to be a pretty common thing that I get asked or was asked about when I was working.
Okay.
Yeah, so that looks.
So basically being, the
Yeah.
sheriff's department base is coming in at basically around 100% of their expenditures, which is actually good considering that the sheriff's patrol got a raise. They're the only, that's substantially bigger. And so they are able to control it within the revenues being more realistic about what we're collecting from people is down 6%. But part of that is the Bad River Patrol, which we were just saying it's 325, it's 345 and 345. So even though the revenues went down there, I don't know how to represent that, but human services budget is here. They basically had 100% on their 100% on their expenses, 101 on their revenue. And in the Health and Human Services budget, they basically approved it the other day on the condition that Health and Human Services employees get a 2% raise. And so I didn't put that in the budget, obviously, because it's just we're just going to be taking money out of a bank or doing something to do that. So I didn't put that in there, even though that was a recommendation from the Health and Human Services Committee. In order to simplify the budgetary process, I did remove $35,000 from travel and training and $1,000 of capital from child support. Like a lot of departments, these are not one for one. You get reimbursed. Some of these departments get reimbursed partially from the state. You get 67% of what you expenditure in order to provide these services. Some of them are 100%. So even though we removed $35,000, that decreases revenue by $9,000 and decreases capital by that. So I basically just put these in negative numbers in order to get a number down here, because otherwise I'd have to go through and manipulate each one of these numbers, that every time you decrease an expense, you also decrease a revenue when you get a partially reimbursed service. So that's why that is there. And I did not, the 2%, the 2% increase for Health and Human Services staff was $68,000 for them to get a raise. And with that, it would, there'd be an increased revenue because you're getting some money back from the state for some of these services. It would be a net increase to the general levy of $38,000 for them to get a 2% raise for that department. If we were to give a 2% raise to the entire workforce, we haven't done the exact math on that. Lori, was that around $150,000, Lori, if you're still on the line? Lori?
Yep, I'm here. Hold on, let me look.
Okay, all right, she'll look, and she'll wait, she'll look that up, because she did the math on this, just very seat of the pants. You know, we didn't go down to each department and figure out, because again, some departments get partially reimbursed for this, some don't, so it would be a larger endeavor just to figure that out, but given the straits that we're in, we just didn't budget any raise for anybody. Highway, basically, in order to do the projects, we're actually taking $150,000 from their fund, non-lapsing fund, in order to do the projects. So that gets us back up closer to revenues for them. And again, these are one, go ahead.
That figure is 96,983, but that does not include any overtime figures or holiday pay.
Yep. Yeah. So, and what's Lori's referring to, so if you raise somebody's pay, in the budget line items that she has a regular salary line items on all these budgets, and it's a big stack of paper, and she's just going through that and getting a rough estimate around $100,000. But then we'd also have to go through and figure out, because your rate of pay goes up for overtime, it goes up for payouts, it goes up for everything else. So we'd have to figure that out, but it'd probably be around maybe $130,000, of which we don't have. So I didn't put it in. Going back to highway, slight decrease in transportation, slight increase in revenue. Extension, we'll decrease them a little bit, along with everything else that we did. There's fairs and these other organizations there. Conservation and development, here where you end up with some big increases in the expenses, but you also end up in increases in revenue because you end up with some grants. I know we got a FEMA grant for like 150. So we have like land conservations going from like 206 to 415. But you also end up with these other grants that come into play. Mike, Mary Jo from the Land Conservation Office is in our room here. She wants to say something about the budget. Is that okay, Mike?
Go ahead, let's have it. It's pertinent, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Mary Jo Gingras with the Land Conservation Department. And I do want to point out that line that Clark is talking about right now. That's a substantial increase in the budget. There are approximately 8 different grants that I will be managing next year. And part of this is to generate revenue for the county. So there is a large FEMA grant that's coming in next year. There's a Act 157, which is another $150,000. Those grants are generating conservation projects on the land. Those grants will also provide revenue to local contractors and local landowners to implement that work. And there's money built into those grants to generate straight revenue for the county, utilizing our current staff with no additional expenditures. No hiring of new staff, no hiring of contractors, outside of that revenue that's been allocated to the county. So those are measures specifically designed to generate revenue, but that also takes a substantial workload, increases the workload for staff, and that's also decreased my overall levy. And so it's not going to be realistic every single year to be able to write grants like that and to manage those types of workloads. So I just want to point that out, that you know, those measures are put there to try and generate revenue, but that's not always going to be sustainable for staff to manage that kind of workload. Thank you.
Okay, so we get down to the bottom line here. You basically have your total expenditures of 21.2. You have total revenue of 12.9. We carry that down to this general levy section here. you end up with kind of just a summary of your breakdown. So here's your total expenditures of 21.2. There's our estimated revenue. The sales tax, as you can see, and again, this is a guess on my part. I don't think the economy is going to probably increase next year. I think we're probably going to make the 1.49 this year. I don't think we're going to make that next year because I think a lot of our sales tax was basically, people buying stuff during the quarantine and stocking up and doing projects. And there's the stimulus money. Everybody got money. There's increase in unemployment. So I'm just guessing at this. And I think,
Clark, should line 188 be less 0.5%?
Well, it's 93% of the previous one.
No, but I mean on the column A, should that be 0.5%? Because you're talking about a 0.5%, correct?
Yeah.
You're
So
correct, Pat. I haven't fixed it yet. I forgot.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, all right. So yeah, so we can have, and I'd be more than willing to hear people's opinions on sales tax, because like I say, this is a true flyer, but I think it's an honest appraisement. The same thing we're talking about up here in forestry, right here. We basically budgeted $750,000 in revenue getting from timber sales this year. And Chris, where do you think we're going to land?
We are at 475 right now. And I'm thinking we're going to be somewhere around 6 by the time year end comes.
Yeah. So, and that basically is, we basically saved part of this by basically Chris and the forestry committee selling 3 more slots this year in order to try to increase the revenue for this year. Otherwise, it could have been a $300,000 deficit this year. So we're only going to have 150 from that. So we're trying to be honest about budgeting and saying, we think we're going to get 550 next year, And so again, there's decreases that we have to cover. We have no decreased expenses when you cut $200,000 in revenue. There isn't anything that gets cut. It's just less revenue. And so when we talk about the sales tax, right here, does anybody in the committee want to weigh in if they think this is a realistic number, or you think I'm being too low or too high?
I think it's realistic. There's people out there got to have a whole bunch of toilet paper and cleaning supplies that they haven't gone through yet.
Yeah.
Okay. So state exempt computer aid is $10,000. Wheel tax, basically right now, we can talk about it at the county board, is 0. I'm looking at 250 to transfer from the general fund. That gets us to basically 6.673 million for general levy when you do go through the whole math. And this is our maximum, 6.679. So we're actually $6,000 under our maximum budget there. When we go through the capital, so these are things, so what I'm trying to do, and I've told you this before, is I'm trying to save that general levy because we have hundreds of thousands of dollars in decrease general levy. And we really have no decreases in revenue, in expenses because of that. So, and you can't raise your general levy, as you well know, beyond the $23,000, which is allowed by the state. So some of these costs, we had been budgeting, obviously, in general levy. So these are some vehicles we have, and we've been making loan payments on them. I think the payoff, we could just pay them off for $39,000 or just keep paying this. Security cameras, our courthouse security cameras basically are partially digital and partially analog, and we have some holes in our security. where we can't see or record people that are doing nefarious activities. Highway, we're basically, we're going to borrow $405,000 for equipment, $620,000 for construction. And so years ago, back when the county had money, all those costs were in the general levy. And slowly, we're just putting more and more on the debt levy because the general levy doesn't change. HHS, I'm proposing 2 cars for them. One, to decrease general levy expenses on mileage. But more importantly, it totally freaks me out that we would have county staff picking up children from child protection or clients and putting them in their own car and driving around. If there was an accident, that's going to be that's a substantial risk to our county employees. Our county employees could get in the hole where either if they get injured, is it a worker comp? Is it their private auto insurance? Is it the county's insurance? And God forbid a child gets injured in a personal car while on work time. That just, I'm sorry, that I don't like that at all. So I basically want to buy 2 cars for Health and Human Services, and we're basically going to be utilizing, we're basically creating a little fleet. We have a car here that Highway wasn't using, and we utilize that as a fleet vehicle. And the departments that utilize it they get a bill from Highway for so many cents per mile to use it, and then the cost for the car and the gas go to Highway. So it's kind of like we're kind of running our own little mini fleet thing, but it's internally. We're not paying enterprise to do this. Boiler needs to be replaced at HHS. These 2 expenses, the Sanborn building loan and the New Horizons building loan, when I started investigating through the budget, no one was budgeting for those. They were just coming out of the budget. People just paid the check. They were never allocated. They were never appropriated. And obviously, good government, transparent government dictates that you don't expend any money that hasn't been appropriated in a public setting, approved by a governing body. And so that was a big hole there. So this will be in the budget and be appropriated to pay for these in debt levy through the appropriate process. Sheriff's Department, radio link, tasers, they got to replace all their tasers. I guess they're having a lot of problems with the tasers. You're supposed to do test firings every now and then, and they're getting more and more non-firings, which was obviously could endanger, it could endanger somebody's life if a taser doesn't go off properly and you have to pull your weapon. So we're going to be doing that. A courthouse radio connect basically would allow security within the courthouse to connect right to dispatch. Instead of a phone, they basically just have a regular radio that would basically highlight where people are. In addition, what it would do is if somebody hits a panic button, so everybody in the courthouse has a panic button on their phone, but right now the technology is such, the courthouse just had a panic button. And so when that happens, sheriffs have to come in and run over 3 floors into every office to find which office has the panic. And this would help fix that problem so that if there is an issue, that it would be dictated to that phone extension, and that person would be able to get help immediately if they have a disturbance or a live shooter incident. We don't really have as you well know, we don't have very good security here, and we're trying to improve it. Couple squads. We want to put a fence up around one of the radio towers. And then this is our rec officer, basically UTV, I believe a snowmobile and a trailer. And these are all reimbursed over a 5-year period with the DNR because the DNR pays for that, but we have to initially put the money up and then we get reimbursed from that. The airport, this is what we talked about earlier. I'm removing from general levy the airport request for capital so we can save the hundreds of thousands of dollars decrease of general levy revenue to pay our staff. Computer processing, basically capital outlay for courthouse, capital outlay for law enforcement, and these are servers, storage devices, computers, what it takes to basically do the normal rotation for that. This $286,000, before I got here, the county was just had a line of credit. And they basically would just make purchases throughout the year. Excuse me. They make a line of credit. They would basically just purchase things throughout the year and just put it on a line of credit and just make a standard payment every year of $980,000 on that. And that was not according to Hoyle either. I basically have gone over that before. I had to convince the Department of Revenue not to fine us $500,000 for that practice. And so what I did was last fall, I converted that to an 8-year loan. And that's $286 a year for now. We have 7 years left to make on that to clean up that problem that we had back then. And again, this is something that we're looking forward to, 7 years from now, you're not going to have that payment anymore because we're going to clean up all that issues. That brings your capital improvement budget to 1.9 million. I basically have $184,000 that I basically am transferring from 2 different funds. One fund is a leftover bond fund from building the jail, and there's $84,000 in there, and it's been sitting there for years and years and years because obviously the jail was paid off and the bonds were paid off, but there was money still left in there. Obviously, since you issued bonds, it needs to be utilized for capital or debt, because that was the intent of the bonds. Legally, you can't take that $84,000 and transfer to general levy to pay staff. So this is a good utilization of that. In addition, there's another fund in our investment report that has $250,000 in it, and it has been utilized for years. And so what I'm doing is transferring $100,000 from there, leaving 130 or 150 in there in order to be there in case we have, let's say the elevator breaks in the courthouse here. Well, you're going to need $100,000 for that. So that would be a backup for $100,000. Or let's say your boiler, the jail goes out, you're going to need $50,000 for that. So I think that 130, 150 range is probably appropriate for emergency repairs throughout the year. So I'm recommending those 2 transfers, and basically that means your debt levy is $1.7 million for this year, and you can see from your previous year, your debt levy was 1.2 million. That puts our overall levy between that number and that number. Let's see, it would be, so the overall levy basically is going to be $6, and in this budget would be $6.70, basically be a 4% increase in property taxes to the citizens. And I think that's my presentation for right now. So I'd be looking for discussion on this and what you would like the county board to see on the 6th, because I'll be going through this same discussion on them, and I'm looking for feedback from you concerning how do you think we should present this, or how would you like me to present this to the full county board? So we've been at this for an hour and a half. I don't know if their attention span's that big, but I'm looking for feedback and suggestions.
This is going to be on October 6th.
October 6th at 9 o'clock, we're going to be back at the church for people who want to come. And in addition, we will be, doing remote, obviously, for people who want to view remotely. We did learn a couple lessons on from the Zoom portion. The recording from our YouTube channel didn't turn out very good because we had too many cameras operating. So we will increase probably the presentation for the YouTube channel. But from your aspect, being either a participant there or a participant at home, your experience should be the same. And we have a couple other things for the county board to consider. One of them is a resolution from Health and Human Services. We have a resolution from Forest. We have, I think, something from Land Conservation. So, it's not a fully packed meeting, but the budget will be the budget will be the meat of it. because I want them to be able to give this committee feedback if they feel they want to do something different. Going back to the timeline, then that gives us a few days to figure out where do we want to go with the final, with the final budget. And so, the board's going to look at it. You guys will take one more view at it. We basically will publish it as after this committee looks at it, this committee will publish it. And then the board will just approve it on the 10th. And traditionally that's our perfunctory discussion. Last year, when you had the budget approval, it was a 5-minute operation. It was just like, here's the budget, no questions, and it was approved. That's why I'm trying to build this in for the county board, to give them a chance to ask questions, to have input, to make their thoughts be known concerning what do they want to see. And then this committee will compile that information to present it on the 15th. We could build in more meetings for finance, but I'm kind of interested to see what county board says. And if you want to meet more, I'm fine with it. But the last time you can meet will be October 15th.
I think it's going to be important that on this, on the 6th, for the county board to have a crack at this, only because in the last couple of months here, some of the things that roads has done, or the highway committee has done, and what have you, they have their own opinion. And this is the time for them to weigh in on the 6th, so that we, as the finance committee, can come back together on the 15th and talk this over. Laura, you got anything to throw in at this? Or Pat?
So Clark, for the meeting on the 6th of October, could you put together, maybe a one-page summary that says one option for the board is to consider an annual wheel tax for a short number of years until a referendum can be considered by the voters. And in that referendum, ask the voters to consider I'll say X% increase for X or Y years, and then explain how it would be needed to provide a roughly same level of services that the public is used to, and note that it would not be primarily for law enforcement or a law enforcement center. And that way you'd have gap funding, if you will, through the wheel tax on an annual basis until the public decides if they want to support the referendum, and then make it clear in the referendum discussion that if the referendum fails, the next most viable option that you see for the board is to consider the wheel tax on an ongoing basis. That way it gives the public a chance to choose, essentially, do they support a referendum, a levy referendum at a certain rate for a certain number of years versus the higher probability of wheel tax if that fails.
Yeah, plus the multi-year legislative issues, which I discussed earlier, which I would go over with the board also, because I know, for some reason, I like the law and order levy. I think it would get through the legislators. I know people don't like the word law and order, but it's a court systems. I don't know if that's even better a title, but you have to play the politics that you are handed, and the politics, I think, would work with this court levy. But I guess we'll see where we go with that.
Well, I support you pursuing that effort, and I'm thinking of the referendum because that allows the public to weigh in on a proposal, and then the wheel tax is the one thing that's in the immediate control of the board if they choose to go down. The other things are more outside of the control of the board or the voters in the county. Yeah. That's all. It just keeps you on a path one way or the other of funding operations.
Yeah, I'm trying to create a sustainable organization for you and a sustainable budget, because we can fix it 1 year, but you're basically just pushing the ball down the court. The other thing you have to consider from the politics, Pat, is this is an off year election for the board, for the county
Yeah.
board. And normally when I look upon things at the state legislator level, you want to try to do some of these harder choices the further away from election that you can. Because the thinking obviously is that voters forget. And so those are kind of, when you think about the politics of a county board making a decision, that's one of the things that play into my mind also. Any
I'm
other
so
comments?
concerned about the timing of everything, but could we also have options? I mean, if we have to do this wheel tax, you know what, if we're talking $30, yeah, Eau Claire and Milwaukee County have that. Even Dane County doesn't have $30. You know, it's, but at the same time as trying to cover our expenses because of poor planning that was put down before us, let's try to minimize our impact on the people that it's going to hurt the worst too. So I'd like to see what the minimum we would need is and what a comfortable spot would be maybe, because it's just, the whole thing leaves a bad taste.
We basically picked $25 because it would basically stop us from removing money from the bank on a temporary basis just to balance our checkbook. And it would restore the cuts to the outside organizations. And that's pretty much it. That still wouldn't allow, that $25, it wouldn't allow staff wages increase. But that would give us time to figure out how can we get there for the year 2022. You know, and so that would, you know, we could figure out, you know, there's not a lot of services that are going to generate $100,000 for staff increase that we could basically increase fees $100,000. But we could increase fees maybe $5,000 or $10,000 somewhere. And some of them, we're just trying to be more open and honest. What are we actually collecting? That's what we're going to budget. We're not going to put in a number to balance the budget on something we're not going to collect. So you're right. There needs to be time to build in the systemic review of the government, which is what do we really need to provide, and can we provide it in a different fashion?
And like I said, I'd like to see some of the services that we provide that are on the tax levy. What if we switch some of those to user fees? Is there just any wiggle room we have in that? Because user fees are under our control. So.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't really charge for these services. We don't really charge for highway. You can't charge for highway. Health and Human Services, there are some co-pays for MA services, but that doesn't really, it doesn't really do much.
No worries, I'm going to keep researching. I'm talking out of the box thinking, because they hamstring us with the rules that they give us, plus put on the unfunded mandate. So I'm totally realistic of where we sit. It's not a pretty place, and it's definitely not a pedestal. But I know we're all smarter than some of this, and there's ways of figuring it out. We're just going to need to be more creative.
We're going to put a toll road on Highway 2.
I think that works. I think that works.
Oh, wait, we're going to have, wait,
Let's
we got
just start pulling them all over.
Hold it, we're recording this meeting. We're going to edit that portion out.
Clark, this is Pat. In regards to the contributions to outside organizations, the $25 wheel tax you have said would restore those monies, but we're still going to take a close look at if there are some cuts that we can make, though. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. You know, I mean, you know, like here, it's like, you know, the county fair didn't have a fair.
Yeah.
Do we still need to give them $20,000? Can we give them $10,000? You know,
and some of those just might not be options. Like Northwest Regional Planning, and then the economic development. I'd really encourage you to talk to Betsy on what the implication of that cut would be, and then we could come back and with more research and consider if there's something we can save, which potentially could mean a wheel tax less than what has been mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If there are no other questions, then I'll try to get all this stuff together by next week, because I'm gonna try to put this package together
This is Marty Vitek. I have one more question.
Oh, Marty's got a question.
I think before we get too far into this, we should probably define precisely who would be subject to the wheel tax. For example, I have an old beat up truck I use for snow plowing. I have another vehicle I use for kind of work and beating up. And I have a third one that I use for formal occasions, I guess.
Yes,
I'm wondering, are all three of them subject to it, or are one, or what?
There's,
it's all of them.
well, the statute, everything under 8,000 gross vehicle pounds is my understanding.
Yeah.
I think
It's
that's.
all of them.
Yeah, it's the state, so I don't know who drives around in a 9,000 pound vehicle, a 9,000 gross weight vehicle, but it's everything under eight and under.
Well, that farm vehicle is 12,000 pounds.
Then I think that would probably
It's
be
not
exempt.
farm. Farm is under one of the exemptions.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we'll do a more thorough write-up on that. And Matt Erickson, I don't know, Matt Erickson, did you join us? He had another meeting he had to attend to, but he's one that's been doing all the legwork on that because it is a Department of Transportation issue. And so he's kind of my local expert on that. We're gonna try to, today's 24th, meetings on the 6th. I would try to get this packet out probably on Wednesday then, the 30th. I'll try to get as much information as we can done by Wednesday for that meeting.
Clark, this is Pat. I very much appreciate all the work that you've put into the budget and then researching all of these issues. It's appreciated.
Thank you. Appreciate that. If there's no other further questions, I just have a couple things on the administrator updates. I'm working on applying for a Department of Justice grant. We're trying to get some either COVID tests or some air handling systems within our jail to help in case we get an influx in there. It's $58,000. We were trying to put in for a cleaner. Right now, we are using a CARES money from the state to pay for a cleaner and a temperature taker for court. So that person takes everybody's temperature, cleans in between each case, cleans all the chairs, cleans all the tables. We were hoping to be able to utilize that grant next year to fund that part-time position. And they said, no, they don't want to pay for personnel. So I don't know so that's another $25,000. If the court mandates us to do that, we have to provide it. Again, that's kind of the push and pull with the judicial branch versus the government legislative branch, let's say, what you are. And if he mandates us, we're going to have to take $25,000 from somewhere and pay for that service also. We basically yesterday, you probably know, probably a lot of my time has been taken up with our order here. So you may have heard yesterday we came out with this. I did a couple TV interviews, newsprint. We basically are ordering the bars in Ashland and bars within a 2.5 mile radius of Ashland to be closed starting at 12:01 a.m. on Friday and open back up on Sunday, 11:59 on October 11th. The reason that we're doing this is we have a number of bars that are already closed because their staff have to be quarantined or they're sick. And so what's happening is the bars that are open, they're being overly packed with individuals and it's spreading the virus further. As you can tell, we had our highest incident count on Monday of 15. Yesterday we had 9 and every day is just going this direction. And so what we want to do is take a little pause. And I want to be able to say this way on Monday the 12th, all the bars can open up on Monday the 12th. They'll have all their staff will be well, they'll be off quarantine, and the citizens that go back to these establishments will spread out. They're going to go to their normal neighborhood bars. They're not going to crowd into other bars, and hopefully that will decrease the transmission of COVID. And so this order is on our website. If you're interested in it, I did send it out to the county board, so the county board has it. And that's been basically taking a lot of time this week to try to come up with something that's fair and equitable. Restaurants are open. Restaurants can maintain their service and serve. This is not prohibition. We're not outlawing alcohol. But if we take like the Schwamigan Grill across the street here, they have indoor seating, they have outdoor seating, and they have 12 chairs at a bar. They can maintain their operation totally as is, with the exception of just taping off those 12 chairs at the bar. So the restaurants that have bars just have to close down their bar seating, because that's where we're seeing this transmission, because you're spending an extended period of time next to somebody or yelling across the bar trying to get a drink. And when you sit at a table, a server's coming to you, hopefully with a mask. The interaction is not very long. It's not an hour-long conversation you're having. It's a 2-minute conversation. And so that really helps decrease transmission. And I just kind of wanted to make sure the committee was aware of that. The other thing that from a committee standpoint is, and I think I talked to the executive committee about this, we have taken through tax deed a property in Glidden. It's a gas station, and it's filled full of stuff. And so we're looking at trying to figure out, probably working through the executive committee, but the reason I'm bringing it up to you is it might be a financial issue. We sent employees up from Forest and Highway on top of the roof. The roof has a leak in it. Partial of the inside roof has collapsed a little bit, maybe a 10-foot square area. The roof would need replacing. We're trying to figure out how to winterize this thing. But the same aspect, when we sell properties from tax deed, we are not responsible. They're as is. You know, if there's asbestos or there's contamination, it's not the county's problem. There's a state law that we don't have to clean these properties up, because otherwise counties would never take possession of property. The Land Information Council has been working on this. We put it up for sale on August 28th. No one bought it. So now we have to figure out, is there a way we can either try to sell it quickly, or is there a way that we need to winterize this building? Because we would hate to see the building just totally collapse on itself due to the issues it's having. And I just wanted to make the committee aware of that we're kind of working on that also. And that's my administrative report. Questions?
Clark?
Go ahead.
Now, are these properties that we're taking now all being put on the same website as what our physical, desks and things? Are they all going on that Wisconsin auction site?
Yeah, so in the past you have had, and including the one on the August 28th, I'm not very happy with the response of people bidding on these properties. So we are basically going through, staff is going through, do we need to come up with a new ordinance or just a policy to change from sealed bids at the county clerk's office to live bids on Wisconsin public property, so that we can, get these people from, my goal is to, these little hole in the wall slivers, a couple acres here that we can get maybe $500 for. Somebody from Chicago may buy it because they're like, I want an escape plan. I want to escape to the North Woods if it all breaks down, and they'll probably never visit the property. So I want to try to expand our reach instead of just right here. So we're hoping to get that done. It'd be nice to be able to do it this year. I did look up, we spent $1,100 advertising for that last land sale. And granted, we sold one of the homes we sold for $30,000. And so that we did make money on that, but it doesn't make sense to advertise when we just have $200 or $300 worth of property to sell and spend $1,000 on it. We want to try to group that and maybe do it less frequently. So staff is still investigating that. Pat had mentioned at that committee meeting, I think, Pat, you had mentioned that you'd be interested in having another land sale this year so we could transfer the titles this year so they could be on the property tax for next year. And I believe you were the one that mentioned that.
Yeah, it accomplishes that, and then further research at some point when the county holds these properties, they list, the back taxes, but we don't know, I don't know offhand from the information I was given, how long the county has held them. And then in some cases, you know, like in the city of Ashland, there's that public fire protection fee that is attached to the property. So some of them actually cost money to hold in addition to the foregone tax revenue. So if we could come up with a policy or a way of getting them off the county's ownership and back to the public, in the long run, that would certainly help. But the cost of advertising is expensive through newspapers. So hopefully the surplus auction website is an avenue that's cheaper and perhaps one that's just a lot more flexible so these parcels can be listed.
Yeah, and so part of the advertising, the staff is researching what the state statute is concerning the proper notice. And as you're well aware, we spend a ton of money putting in notices in the paper and also minutes and proceedings of the county board. You know, those are state statutes. So we have to figure out, you know, what is a minimum statute for that? Because I don't think people in Chicago are going to be reading our public notice, but we have to find out what's a minimum required for that. We do, just to let you do know, we don't take all the properties that are available to take. So down in Glidden, right across the street is another gas station that used to be a gas station maybe back in the 60s or the 50s. I don't even know. It looks really old. No one's paid property taxes on that thing for 20 years. And we have yet to take it because it's a negative value property. If we took possession of it, it has asbestos all over it. We'd have to basically abate it and then tear it down, because you can't burn a piece of property, you can't burn a building that has asbestos in it. And so we've decided, the land committee has decided not to take that property, because why would we take a negative worth property? So that was news to me, that we basically pick and choose which properties we want to take. So we don't want to end up with negative worth properties. But then they end up being ghost properties. You know, there's no insurance, there's no owner, you know, there's no, I don't even know about the liability on it. You know, if kids go in there and hurt themselves, I don't know what happens to that, but something I learned the other day, so.
Yeah, what's nice about that service is they also collect the transfer fees and everything with it too. I have a name somewhere. I saw him at WCA last year, and he's very open to answering any kinds of questions that we have and what other municipalities may have done. I've been on the alert list for that thing for, I don't know, a decade at least. So there's lots of people from lots of places that have that, and they just get the alerts when there's auctions. So it would seem to be in our best interest.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, what I was going to bring up, Clark, was that a couple of meetings ago, we talked about all this storage that we have up in the attic. Has anyone, of the courthouse, has anyone had an opportunity to go up there, take a look, and how can we lessen that load? Stress bearing on those roof trusses is overwhelmed from some of the photos that we've seen. I've not been up there myself personally. However, from the photos, obviously those roof trusses were not designed to carry that kind of load.
Yeah, so I've been sending staff up there periodically. So we've taken 50 boxes and we're destroying some, and the others, we have a guy working through DVR on a work trial today. Actually, he's working downstairs on the first floor in a shredder. And so he's getting a work experience shredding the information. It doesn't cost the county anything. It's a state program to provide temporary employment to people who need experience and work training and work hardening. So we're slowly picking away at it. But a lot of those things, they need to be stored. They're, you know, things that from the 1800s. It's super interesting to go up there and see these things from 1880s and 1890s, all these old plats and records. And, you know, you wouldn't believe how many people were deemed insane back in the 1890s. You know, they had it's like, you look at all these court proceedings, deemed insane, you know, and I'm just kind of like, wow, that was like the standard deserved treatment for the courts back then. So So, yeah, we are trying to work on it, Mike. And I would like to figure out if we could get an engineer in here at some point to say, what is the maximum load we can put up there? But I haven't had time to work on that yet.
Okay. I just don't want to lose that. I didn't see anything in the budget, 5,000 or whatever, to have somebody come in and or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, well.
Next meeting date is October 15th, 9 o'clock.
15 or 16?
I think it's a 15th. I have, let's see here,
15th was on your slide.
There it is.
15th. Yep, that's a Thursday, the 15th. That's it.
Any more questions, comments? I believe we're looking to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I'll second. This is Laura.
We have a motion by Marty, second by Laura. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.